Welcome, movie fans. Thanks for joining us for episode 148 of Reading Between the Reels, the premier podcast of finding common ground between Shakespeare and space wizards. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. If you've been enjoying the show, please like, follow, and subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can also support the show by posting on your socials and by joining our Facebook group. I'm Craig Dickinson, and today on the show, we're bringing you the third in our series of Star Wars conversations with my English classes, and this one features the return of New York Times best-selling author of the William Shakespeare Star Wars series, Ian Doescher.
Did Anakin bring balance to the Force? At one point, at the time, the Jedi became too powerful in episodes 1, 2, and 3. Then Order 66 almost killed all the Jedi. So did he bring balance physically or in a non-physically sense?
I'm gonna say that's a really great question. I'm gonna say he never brought balance. In the same way, so imagine that you're, at the playground they have the teeter totter or seesaws is what we call them, right? And like one person sits on one end, one sits on the other. I feel a little bit like, like Anakin, basically, like it was like this, and then all of a sudden it was like this. Like the balance was never there. And I feel like maybe the moment that he sort of ran over the middle of that and tipped the balance the other way is maybe at the moment that he helps kill Mace Windu, possibly, is what I'm gonna say. And that's where the balance sort of tips over to the dark side. Yeah, it's a good question though. Yeah, it's a great question.
What kind of leader is Leia?
I think she is a strong leader who doesn't take nonsense from anybody. I mean, she doesn't take nonsense from anybody just from like the first time we see her through to the end. She clearly is a person who, who believes in hope against the odds, which maybe is part of what makes her a good match for Han. She's clearly a very strong leader, a very capable leader. It seems like as she goes on throughout her life, she becomes in some ways more, I'll say, force-led leader. I almost use the word spiritual, but that's not maybe quite right. That's more our world than hers. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Thanks.
Well, how does family affect the story?
How does family affect the Star Wars story in particular, or any story?
Star Wars.
Well, I think it adds this layer of complexity that that it wouldn't have otherwise. It's also, I think, part of what makes it more meaningful, more emotional, more, in some ways, more tragic when things go badly. Right? I mean, it would be one thing if Luke Skywalker were just fighting this really bad villain, but then the fact that there's this layered in complexity of Darth Vader being his dad, it just creates this, it creates this thing where all of a sudden Luke has to reconsider Darth Vader and actually say, I don't want to just defeat him. I actually want to see if I can make him be the dad that I kind of want him to be. And I think you see that across all of the family relationships. I mean, I think it ends up being, it creates all this complexity within Rey when we find out sort of her familial lineage and her relation to Palpatine. And I just think it sort of creates thornier issues, right? It's like, your family, they say your family are people who you sort of have to deal with and have to live with. And that's not necessarily true of people who aren't your family. And so I do think it creates this sort of sense of obligation and emotions. Yeah. Thanks.
How is hope shown in the movies?
I think it's shown most often in the sense of not giving up, even when the odds are against you. It's hard to imagine just about any moment in the, especially in the main Star Wars movies, where the quote unquote good guys, right, like where they have like sort of the upper hand, like they almost never come to a battle with a greater force than the Empire or something like that, and so, but they never stop believing in their cause. And so I think hope is almost defined in Star Wars as not giving up and not never ceasing to believe, even when the odds are against you. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. What do you think would have happened if Luke joined Vader?
I think it would have made the chances for the rebellion a lot worse. I think you would have ended into this, era where you had a powerful. I think they may well have gotten rid of the Emperor and that maybe they became this sort of new Sith and apprentice. Who were very powerful, and I think probably Vader would have, continued Luke's training really effectively, and it's a dark world to contemplate if Luke had joined Darth Vader. I think that the sort of whole history of the galaxy would have ended up a lot differently than it did. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to add that I almost think that there's not a greater change you could make in the Star Wars movies than that moment. Yeah.
Why is it important that Luke builds his own lightsaber?
That's a great question. Well, let's just hit the logistical level of his other lightsaber is gone, but the more realistic level, I think it's part of his training. It's part of his maturity as he becomes a Jedi, to sort of show that he can do this on his own and not learn. I mean, clearly he had to learn how to do that, and so that involves more sort of training and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's important because it just shows his development as a character and his ongoing maturity, and not relying so much on the past and people from the past to help him.
Thank you. How does fear affect each character's choices?
Do you have specific characters in mind, or
Luke Skywalker, probably.
Yeah. So, well, I think. I mean, fear is certainly what makes him in The Empire Strikes Back. Fear is certainly what makes him go and try to fight Darth Vader, even though he's not really ready to do that, and because he's afraid not for himself but for his friends, and that's a really similar sort of, right. I mean, we see the same sort of like Anakin's fear about what might happen to Padme, like in some ways the characters in Star Wars make the worst decisions not when they're worried about themselves, but when they're worried about what is going to happen to people they love, which is why, I mean, in the case of both Luke and Anakin, that is such a powerful thing for the bad guys to use as sort of a like way to try to turn them. Yeah.
How does Luke and Leia being siblings influence the movie?
I'm going to give you the the less deep answer and then the deeper answer. I think the less deep answer. I think on a pure level of storytelling, I think there's a possibility that George Lucas is like, uh-oh, I've sort of created this love triangle between Luke and Leia and Han, and I don't really actually want that to be a focus. I don't want people to be worrying about that, or I want to find an easy way out of that. And so I'll just make Luke and Leia brother and sister. Because it is really hard for me, and Mr. Dickinson might have different views on this, but it is really hard for me to imagine that they had the idea of Luke and Leia being brother and sister in mind in the beginning of Empire Strikes Back when they have Leia kiss Luke. But on a deeper level, I mean, again, I think it goes back to the question earlier about how does the idea of family enrich these stories, right? And it certainly makes the stakes for Luke when he's fighting Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi. It makes the stakes much more. Much larger when all of a sudden he's got this sister that he wants to protect and doesn't want her to be threatened in the same way that he has. And then I also think it becomes this really lovely. I mean, in it's the middle movie of the Last Jedi. That's what I'm trying to think of. In the Last Jedi, it actually creates this really sweet moment when Luke and Leia are together, sort of again, and you can see how that relationship has. I mean, you sort of want to find out. You sort of almost just want a movie or two about how their relationship grew as brother and sister over the years between Return of the Jedi and the Last Jedi, because it certainly does seem to me like that there's a strong relationship there by the time of the Last Jedi. That was a long and rambling answer. Sorry.
Do you think Luke would still be a Jedi if he hadn't met Yoda?
I'm gonna say no. I mean, there's part of me that wants to say, like, that was always his destiny and it would have happened one way or the other. But it's hard to imagine how that training would have happened. I mean, how he would have actually become a Jedi had he not found Yoda. So I'm going to say no to that one. Yeah.
What was the most difficult part in making the Star Wars universe?
I mean, gosh, what a big question. I think, I mean, for me, I think it's the way that George Lucas sort of, I mean, if you just watch the first movie, right, A New Hope, there's clearly so much more sort of lore in the world of Star Wars and the galaxy of Star Wars than what is actually goes on in that movie, right? You hear about Clone Wars, which is you hear about this thing that happened in the past. You hear about places and events that don't actually show up in the movie but are talked about. And I think that is when you are writing a book or a story that is, whether it's like science fiction or fantasy, I think one of the biggest challenges always is how do you have a really clear picture of what the entire world looks like, even though you might just be writing this one sort of story from within that world. And I think that the really successful stories that do that, I mean, think about like Harry Potter or other things like that, right? The successful stories that do that have a sense of this bigger world, but don't feel like they have to tell you every last thing about it within this one story they're telling. And so I would guess anyway that would be a hard thing about creating the Star Wars universe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What do you think the Force really represents?
Well, I I guess I don't know that I feel it represents anything other than what's said in the movies, right? It is it's a field of energy that surrounds us and binds us and penetrates the whole galaxy. I mean, that's the sort of the one way it's defined, right? It certainly is like a form of religion in these stories, right? So it is certainly like, and as the sort of Star Wars universe gets expanded more and more, you sort of learn that it's kind of one among a few religions in that galaxy. So yeah, I guess, and I also think, I mean, if we think about how it relates to our world, it does feel to me like it's related in a lot of ways to some Eastern religions. Like I think Buddhism is probably maybe closest to what the Force is in the Star Wars universe. So I don't know. I guess there are a few different answers on different levels. Yeah.
Thank you.
Why is redemption important in Vader's story?
I think it's important because I think it shows that even people who have whose lives have gone in really kind of horrible directions, right? Can in fact like nobody is so far gone that they can't be turned around. And so, Darth Vader, who is this really horrible and brutal guy, especially when we first meet him, actually even he has the ability to be turned around. And I think that in some ways, gives all the rest of us some hope. When we screw up or when we do things to people we wish we hadn't done, I mean, I think that showing that even the worst villains can turn around and find good places in their heart, I think that matters. Yeah. And I think that's why we keep telling those stories, right? I mean, it's like Darth Vader and the Grinch are just like different shades of the same story.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
How do you think the Force was developed, and why do you think it's only within a few characters?
So, I guess my understanding of the Force, such as it is, I guess I wouldn't say that it was developed. I guess I would say it was always there. And again, my understanding is that it's not that characters necessarily, it's just about whether or not people can sort of access the Force. And some people have more of an inclination or what they would call a Force sensitivity, right, to the Force. But I'm not sure Star Wars ever says that the Force is just totally closed off to some people. So I guess if we believe that the Force exists, and then to me it's like, well, it's one of those things within this galaxy that has always kind of been there, and it's kind of just a matter of whether or not people are wanting to tap into it and be part of it and know it and experience it, than whether or not they can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
How does the Emperor control people?
Well, I guess, I mean, on a certain level, right? I mean, he certainly controls certain people through the Force, right? If we're talking about like a certain lower, sort of almost more mechanical level of controlling people, right? But then also, I mean, if we're thinking about somebody like Anakin or other people who, I mean, he's also a very skillful manipulator of human emotions, right? And so he knows how, and this is where I mean, I don't think in your classes yet you've probably encountered the Shakespeare play Othello, and Iago is the villain in Othello. And what Iago does is he makes Othello very jealous. He suggests that Othello's wife is having an affair with this other guy. And he really is able to get into Othello's mind and just like, to the point where Othello can, is just absolutely certain that this affair has happened. And I think, and it's because Iago, the villain, is such a skillful manipulator of Othello. And I think that the Emperor is very much the same in terms of Anakin, right? So I'm not sure I would exactly call that controlling him, but he's certainly manipulating him. He certainly is, like just planting all these things inside of his head. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
How do the movies keep people interested across all three?
Oh, it's just really good storytelling. I mean, I think it's through a mix of like just the fascination of, I mean, you're seeing things on, especially back when those movies came out, you're seeing things on screen that you'd never seen before. You're seeing these creatures who look interesting. You're seeing things be funny. You're seeing adventure that is very exciting. And then there is this sort of ongoing story, especially once you get to the Empire, or Empire Strikes Back and into Return of the Jedi. I mean, you are at that point really invested in the characters and how it's going to end up for them. And so I think it's just a mix of a bunch of different good storytelling elements that keep people really interested in it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
What do you think would happen if Obi-Wan survived?
I guess it depends a little bit on how he survived, right? So did he kill Vader, or did he just run away with the rest of everybody else? There is some sense, if you've seen any of the like Avengers movies, the agent whose name I'm forgetting, but he dies, and therefore the Avengers become the Avengers because they want to avenge his death. And there is, I think, a similar sort of thing for Luke, where he is suddenly very inspired to avenge Obi-Wan's death. So if Obi-Wan doesn't die, does that mean that Luke ends up being, not ever quite the Jedi that he is? I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know that necessarily it hurts the rebellion overall if Obi-Wan lives, but clearly in that moment he felt that his death was going to be the strongest thing that he could do to help Luke and the rebellion move forward. That's a really interesting question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Was Luke right to leave his training early?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I think the ways that things get sort of messed up for him. I mean, did he keep any of the bad things that were going to happen from happening? Like Han still got put into carbonite before Luke even showed up. Lando very likely may have helped Leia escape from Cloud City without Luke showing up and being there, right? Like kind of the only real consequence of him leaving his training early was that he got his arm cut off. And, so I'm going to say no. I'm going to say he was not right to do that. And Yoda was correct. He should have hung around. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What do the rebels lose in order to win?
Interesting question. Well, they certainly lost comrades along the way. They probably also, and this is sort of a cop out of an answer, but they probably had to lose some of their fear. They probably had to lose, toward the end, they had to lose some of their, they had to give up some of their ideas of the way to do a military operation, I guess. I'm thinking about the end of A New Hope, right, where they're all talking about how crazy it is that you could go in and shoot this tiny little hole in the Death Star, and that was going to, make a difference. Yeah, but I think I'm mostly going to say what they had to lose along the way was people, friends. Yeah.
What makes Leia different from any typical princess?
Well, I guess if we think of typical princess in like the Disney sense, which even then is like, I mean, one thing you don't hear about in Star Wars, at least in the movies, like at all, is like you don't hear about like often a princess in a story is somebody who is there, and there are potential princes who are like in line or want to try to win her hand or whatever, things like that. And you don't get any of that. I mean, you don't ever hear that like, Leia has this line of suitors that she decides Han's better, right? And so that I guess is one interesting thing. I mean, she's, and if you think about the way that the word princess had been used, especially thinking about like Disney up to that point. I mean, she was one of the first characters, I think, who was called princess, who was really like a strong, empowering female character, right? And so that I think made her different, and actually probably became a model for the way that we now sort of think of princesses maybe differently than we did in the 1970s. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Why does Luke think there's still good in Darth Vader?
I mean, what he says is that he can sense it. Now, what I also suspect is that he really wants to believe it, right? I mean, he just, when he finds out, you don't hear him saying that he can sense good in Darth Vader before he finds out that Darth Vader is his dad, right? But once he finds out that Darth Vader is his dad, then it's like a natural inclination of, I think, most kids, right? We want our parents to, we want to believe in our parents. We want to we want to be able to have a relationship with our parents. I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? So I do think there's part of it also where it's like he just really, well, if nothing else, he just doesn't want to give up on Darth Vader. He really wants to believe that there's something there that he can help turn around, because all of a sudden the stakes are higher because he's related to him.
Why is the Death Star such a strong symbol?
There's something. I think the interesting thing that George Lucas did was not to make the Death Star look like, like a gigantic spaceship or like a missile or something like that, right? But he made the Death Star look like something that could be mistaken for a moon, right? Which is what Han Solo does, or Luke's. I guess it's Luke who says he's headed for that moon, and so it is this sort of eerie sense that this thing that looks like it could just be any other planet up in the sky is actually a devastating force, as opposed to either a neutral force or a good force, right? And so I do think that just beyond the fact that it is this hugely powerful weapon, right? I also think the fact that it is sort of the round shape that it is makes it a more powerful symbol.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. Thank you for asking. A question that I have is, why does Vader save Luke at the end?
I think he makes a choice. He. In fact, you see him in that moment. You see him look back and forth between Luke and the Emperor, and I think he is making this decision. Like, wait, what am I doing? How has my life gotten me here to where I might be choosing this guy over my son? And so I think he decides in that moment that, despite everything else that he's done and everything else that has happened, here is a moment where he has to make a better choice. And that's
Thank you.
what turns him. Yeah, thanks.
So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on X, Instagram, and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please like, follow, subscribe, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. This helps the show out tremendously and absolutely helps us reach more people. And one last thing, our next episode continues our Star Wars 101 series with special guest David Jesse of Tatooine Sons.